The men's basketball team gave us an exciting and memorable game on Tuesday night, and now the women's basketball team has a top 10 showdown against NC State, a rematch of the Sweet 16, a game that should be exciting, a lot of fun for this Hoosier team to look forward to. Big game that we're going to preview on today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, guys? It is Thursday, December 2nd. This is Locked On Hoosiers, your daily source for IU athletics news, analysis. We've rebranded or unrebranded from Locked On Trace Jackson Davis, which we were yesterday. We're back to Locked On Hoosiers. If the women's basketball team has a big game tonight, we might rebrand to one of them for the night as well. But it was a fun night on Tuesday. We gave you guys a recap of that IU Syracuse game. Now the women's team has a chance to do the same on Thursday. I'm your host, as always, Jacob Rude. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. Remember that Locked On Hoosiers is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays are around the corner, and finding the perfect gift is tricky. Omaha Steaks makes it easy to send friends and family an unforgettable gift guaranteed to be loved. Go to omahasteaks.com, enter college into the search bar to order the perfect gift package. The women's team will have a top 10 showdown tonight against NC State, a surging NC State team, and an NC State team that they met last season in the Sweet 16, pulled off the biggest win in program history to upset the number one seed Wolfpack to move to the Elite Eight, where they would eventually fall to Arizona. A chance to repeat that tonight. Certainly NC State will be looking for revenge. We're going to give you everything you guys need to know about that game, about both teams. I know a lot of you probably have not watched the women's basketball team this year. We've tried to cover them throughout. We're going to give you the Cliff Notes version of this team so you can tune into tonight's game knowing what to expect and hopefully ready to watch a Hoosier victory. As always, though, you can subscribe to Locked On Hoosiers wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Twitter at LO_Hoosiers, where we live tweet all the games. Follow us on Instagram at Locked On Hoosiers. So the basics ahead of tonight's game. It is number 6, Indiana. They fell 2 spots after losing to the defending national champion Stanford in the Bahamas. Also in the Bahamas was NC State, who is now number 2 after beating Maryland. So the Hoosiers move down in the rankings. NC State moves up. Still a top 10 showdown at 7 p.m. tonight. It'll be in Assembly Hall. It'll be on ESPN2. Everybody has ESPN2 unless you completely cut the cord. So no excuse not to tune into these women tonight. A really fun team to watch. IU is 5-1. Their only loss, as we said, was to Stanford 2 games ago. NC State is 6-1, and their only loss is to number 1 South Carolina. So these are 2 really good teams that have played really tough schedules and have shown out in various ways throughout the season. IU's loss to Stanford was by 3 points. NC State's loss to South Carolina to open the season was by 9 points. So these are 2 elite teams that are going to meet on Thursday tonight. As you're listening to this, IU has a win over number 13 Kentucky. NC State has a win over then number 2 but depleted Maryland. So programs that have proved themselves as well this year. It's a Sweet 16 rematch from March. I mentioned that was the biggest win in IU history. For the women's side, Indiana won that game 73-70. All 5 starters for both teams return. The Hoosiers that night were led by Allie Patberg with 17 points. Mackenzie Holmes had 16. Nicole Cardano-Hillary had 14. Grace Berger had 12 points and 12 rebounds. Alexis Goble had 11 points and 10 rebounds. So the Hoosiers got contributions across the board. Their starting lineup, similar for NC State. Jada Boyd had 18. Reina Perez had 17. Elisa Kanane had 15 points and 12 rebounds. All those names I mentioned are going to be back in tonight's game. We're going to talk about all of them. NC State was a 1 seed. It was both teams return not just all 5 starters, but pretty much everybody involved in that game. Now this is the biggest game in Assembly Hall history for IU basketball. They hosted an NIT championship game, so there is some history with the Hoosiers women's team in Assembly Hall, but nothing quite like this. This is a big one. This is going to be a memorable one. Interestingly, maybe funnily enough, the only win the Hoosiers have in their 5 meetings against NC State was in March in the tournament. The only game that the two sides have played in the tournament as well. NC State has won each of the other 4 games. They played in 2016. NC State won by 14. They played in 03, 01, and 1986. NC State won all those meetings. 3 of those 4 were in Raleigh. The 1 meeting in Bloomington was in 2001. So this is not a team that the Hoosiers meet very often, even in the Big Ten ACC Challenge. But it is a team the Hoosiers have recent success over. Not shocking that the Big Ten and ACC paired these two teams together, considering what happened in March. Also considering the fact that Maryland and NC State were going to play in the Bahamas. So NC State's going to get a swing at both of the elites in the Big Ten Conference this season, at least in the early going. See if the Hoosiers are able to fare a little bit better than Maryland did last week. As I mentioned, Indiana got a look at them up close and personal. They got to watch both of NC State's games live in the Bahamas, so they know what they're going to come up against, and it's a really talented team. Before we talk about how talented Maryland is, let's give you the lowdown on the Hoosiers in case you haven't been paying attention, or maybe if you have, just get you a little bit of a refresher, about what this Indiana team is, how they've played this season, how they are looking heading into this game. But we mentioned them at the top of the show. Today's episode is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Holidays are around the corner, and finding the perfect gift is tricky. Omaha Steaks makes it easy to send friends and family an unforgettable gift guaranteed to be loved. If you guys head on over to omahasteaks.com, enter the word college into the search bar, you'll get the perfect gift package. Literally what it's called, perfect gift package. For $99.99, you'll get 24 entrees like the world-famous bacon-wrapped filet mignons, chicken breasts, sides, desserts, and so much more. Just use that code COLLEGE, and you'll get an additional 8 Omaha Steaks burgers for free with your order. Our sponsors love to throw free stuff at you guys. I hope you are taking advantage of them because I can only imagine how good these burgers are going to taste this winter. We've heard all the reports about shortages and shipping delays, so don't wait, guys. Order that perfect gift package today at omahasteaks.com. Get those 8 free burgers when you enter that code COLLEGE. Achieve gifting greatness with Omaha Steaks. Incredible flavor, incredible value, 100% guaranteed. omahasteaks.com, keyword college. Hoosier women's basketball team, we've talked about a fair amount this season, but no game I don't think has had quite as much hype to it as this one certainly will on Thursday. As I mentioned, the Hoosiers return all 5 starters, and all 5 starters not only are in double figures, but account for almost all of their scoring. 6.5 points of the 72 points come off the bench for the Hoosiers. So the vast majority of their scoring is going to come from the starters. Mackenzie Holmes, generally considered kind of the standout star of this team. She's leading the team in scoring at 15.3 points, 7.5 rebounds. Grace Berger, more of the leader of the team, We've seen her come up in big moments. The Quinnipiac game sticks out as one. 13.8 points, 5.8 rebounds. Also leads the team in assists. Ali Patberg also in the backcourt with Berger. 13.8 points, 3.2 rebounds. Is second on the team in three-point shooting because Nicole Cardano-Hillary had that big game against Butler to kick off the season. Little bit of regression to the mean, still averaging 12 points per game, still shooting 13 of 23 from the three-point line. But again, a lot of that came from that opening game against Butler. Alexa Golboy is the last starter in double figures at 10.8 points, second on the team in rebounding at 7 rebounds. We've talked, it's a little bit of an interesting team because realistically, any of the 5 starters could lead Indiana in scoring on any given night, and it wouldn't be a surprise. But after those 5 starters, there is not much depth on this team. As I mentioned, they don't get much scoring. Keandra Brown, Chloe Moore McNeil, and Grace Wagner each have played all 6 games for the Hoosiers off the bench. Not a ton of production really across the board. Brown is the leading scorer off the bench at 3.3 points. Moore McNeil averages 2.2 points. Grace Wagner has not scored, has only played 14 minutes in those 6 games. So you're not going to get a ton from this bench. All 5 starters, aside from Holmes, average over 33 minutes per game. It's only a 40-minute game, so you can see they don't go to the bench often. They really, really, really rely heavily on these starters, and they produce at a high level. So why not go back to that well? Indiana's coming into this game, though, not exactly convincing of late. They started the season riding high, playing well. Highlight of that being that Kentucky game where they beat the Wildcats in Assembly Hall. They started 4-0, just cruising through, 3-0. The UND game was an exhibition, cruising through the first 3 games. The Quinnipiac game, though, was a bit of a scare. Hoosiers had to rally in the second half and really in that fourth quarter, late in the third quarter, and then throughout the fourth to earn that victory. Then they head to the Bahamas. They fall to Stanford in a game where they shot terribly, to be honest. Shot 32% from the field. And then the Miami game, they go up double digits midway through the fourth quarter and have to hold on in that game where they had 24 turnovers against Miami to win that one. So the last 3 games have not been very convincing for the Hoosiers after starting 3-0. Ultimately, though, they're 2-1 in those games. Picking up wins, even when you play ugly, is a skill and one that good teams need to have. When you're not at your best, are you able to still grind out a win? And the Hoosiers have been able to. They're going to have to be at their best on Thursday, though, against NC State. The good news is they generally, as any team would, play better at home. They had a pretty big crowd, pretty loud crowd for that Kentucky game, obviously a rivalry game. And they took it to Kentucky, especially in that second half. Turned the heat up on them, really took it to them, and picked up the win. It's the final non-conference game of the season for the Hoosiers. There'll be a handful of smattering of non-conference games in the conference schedule, but largely speaking, this is where the non-conference season will end. They'll play Penn State next Monday. A couple of easy games over the holidays, but this is the big one. This is one they certainly would have had circled on their schedule in non-conference play. That being said, NC State also absolutely will have this game circled on their own schedule for all the reasons we just said. This is a prove-it game for the Hoosiers. We talked about that close loss to Stanford, kind of proving in that sense that they belong among the elites. Moral victories only get you so far. You can't repeatedly just claim moral victories. You need actual victories to add to that, to really prove your case. This is a winnable game for the Hoosiers. I think they're good enough to win this game, but they're going to have to play at the level that they did for most of that Kentucky game and early in the season versus the level they played at the last 3 games. Because as I said, NC State is absolutely coming into this game riding high and looking for revenge. We're going to talk about NC State, who might be one of the deepest teams in the country, and who to look out for, what to look out for with that Wolfpack team. It's a scary team. It's a good team. This is going to take a high-level effort from the Hoosiers to win. Before we jump into that, let's talk about our friends at BetOnline. There's no line for this women's basketball game. I couldn't find any lines for any women's basketball on BetOnline, but there will be a line for Saturday's IU Big Ten opener on the men's side against Nebraska. You guys can hop on over to. BetOnline has you covered all season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football season continues to march to the playoffs as well. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all sports action this season. Head to our new and updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Another place giving you guys free money. Just use that promo code LOCKED ON when you make your deposit. Get that 50% welcome bonus. From basketball to football to NHL to boxing to UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Like the Hoosiers, this NC State team also returns all 5 starters. They do add a player that was not available in that Sweet 16 game. Kayla Jones sat out that game with a knee injury, did not play in the tournament. She was first team All ACC last season. Still recovering from the injury this season. Not quite to first team All ACC levels. But that tells you how good this NC State team is, because they have been on a rampage this season after that loss to South Carolina. This is an offense that's scoring 80.3 points per game. One of the best offenses in the ACC. They're second in the league in scoring in the ACC. They're led by Elisa Cunane, Elisa Cunane, 14.4 points per game, 7.4 rebounds, a force down low. Diamond Johnson, 13.3 points and 6.0 rebounds. Jakia Brown-Turner, 10.3 points, 5.9 rebounds. You have Reina Perez also starting. She's scoring 8.6 points per game. Kayla Jones, as we mentioned, at 7.6 points, 3.3 rebounds this season. She was closer to about 11 or 12 points last season. Kai Crutchfield also started all 7 games, 7.4 points per game for the Wolfpack. Azia James is coming off the bench to add some scoring punch at 5.3 points per game. So is Camille Hobby. Jada Boyd, who we mentioned earlier, actually led the team in scoring in that tournament game. Jessica Timmons, Madison Haynes, Genesis Bryant, all have played at least 6 games this season. Sophie Hart's played in 5 games. This is a really, really, really deep team. One of the deepest in the country, perhaps the deepest in the country. They can throw a lot of bodies at you, which is a lot different than what the Hoosiers do. We just talked about the lack of depth they have. Will be interesting to see if that plays a factor in the game. The amount of fresh bodies NC State can keep throwing at Indiana if they're able to wear the Hoosiers down. This is one of those instances where nobody's going to mention it. This is an NC State team looking for revenge. At Media Day, ACC Media Day at the start of the season, Cunane said, quote, "It was really kind of devastating afterwards, but I think we took that hurt and we fueled it into this year." That was a NC State team that had some high hopes, some big dreams for that season. They had won their second straight ACC tournament title. They had two wins over number one ranked teams on the road that season. They were obviously a number one seed heading into the tournament, and ultimately it was a third straight Sweet 16 exit for the Wolfpack. So it's a team that wants to avenge that game, wants to get some revenge for a season they felt was cut short because they had Final Four aspirations last year. They are absolutely blowing teams out. They lost to South Carolina, we said, by 9 points to start the season. Every win since then has been by 18 points or more. Most of them have been by more. They won by 33 points against Wofford and Florida, 48 points against Towson, 21 points against Kansas State. They had the 18-point win over Maryland to kick off their games in the Bahamas, followed it up with a 28-point win over Washington State. This team is an offensive juggernaut of sorts, a deep team that is just laying into opponents. This is a big-time matchup for the Hoosiers. This is an NC State team. The number 2 ranking matches the highest in program history, but it is a program that has had a lot more kind of traditional success, I would say, than Indiana, but a lot of programs have more traditional success than Indiana. This is a program, though, that can be a sort of measuring stick for the Hoosiers. This would be a really, really big win for Indiana. It wouldn't be the biggest win in program history like the win in the NCAA tournament was, but this would be one of the biggest regular season wins, probably the biggest regular season win in program history. It's going to be a really fun game. Two really talented teams, a lot of familiar faces facing off against one another again. I'm excited for this game tonight. Everybody tune in. ESPN2, 7 p.m. tonight. No excuse not to. We'll be back tomorrow to recap that game and give you a preview for the IU men's game against Nebraska on Saturday. Thanks again, though, guys, for making Locked On Hoosiers your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, head on over to Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Appreciate all the love, all the feedback you guys have given us. Had a lot of fun on Wednesday's show with Jared, recapping that IU Syracuse game. Still feel really good about that game and really good about the future for the Hoosiers this season. Be sure to listen to that if you guys did not. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Leave a rating and review. Most importantly, though, guys, have a great Thursday.